Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you very much for attending this event this afternoon. So this presentation forms part of our Learning Disability Conference, and it's called Being Seen, Heard and Valued. And if you want to look on our ExChange website, you'll see that there's been a couple already, which we will release recorded versions of. And there's also a few more to come. So if you want to have a look at the conference website, do please book for those. And we'll put a link to that towards the end of the session as well. So I'd like to introduce our speakers today. So the presentation is called What About Me? People with Learning Disabilities Living on the Edge of Support, What It Is Like and What Needs to Change. So our presenters are Ned Coleman-Fountain, who's from the University of York and is a lecturer of sociology there. We also have his colleagues with him, Erin Simblett rather, from Sunderland People First, will be also presenting with Ned, and also Karen Thu from the same organisation. And we may also be joined later, possibly by Marcus Smith from Sheffield Voices as well. So without further ado, I'd like to pass over to Ned and to thank him ever so much for coming today. Ned's going to speak for about 30 minutes or so, and then we'll be open for question and discussion. So over to you, Ned.
Yeah, okay. Thanks very much, Jeremy. So I think the plan for today is uh, I'll just do a very brief introduction to the project that we've been working on. Erin and myself will talk through the slides. There's a short kind of video at the end, which Erin was involved in, along with Marie, another one of the co-researchers on the project, where they talk about their experiences of doing the research. And then I had a few questions of my own, so as a sort of opportunity for reflections on at least what's coming out of this project. And then after that, some space for questions and also ideas, suggestions from the audience itself. So we'll see how it goes. So I'll briefly introduce the project, and then Erin, is it okay if I hand over to you and then you'll talk us through some of the slides? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you very much, Erin. So this project is called What About Me? People with learning disabilities living on the edge of support. What is it like and what needs to change? And some of the questions that I've got at the end are repeat these questions. So the project involves Erin from Sunderland People First, Marcus, who's not currently with us, I don't think, Sheffield Voices, and other partners and co-researchers from Sunderland People First and Sheffield Voices who aren't with us today. It is led predominantly by academics at the University of Sheffield, Harriet Cameron, Cameron Pattinson, and Catherine Brunswick-Cole, and I've had a small role on the project, so I'll tell you as much as I can. So this project is one that's been co-produced with people with learning disabilities and family carers who have helped generate the research aims, objectives, and conditions and questions for the research, as well as the analysis as well, which we'll talk you through. As I said, it's an ongoing project, so actually there's still a lot of work to do, and there's still things to come out from it. So in a way, you're sort of finding out sort of where we currently are with this bit of research. Co-production's been important to it. It's a way of working together that opens up kind of ways of working for different people and ways of understanding, and allows also people to find ways to communicate from their own frames of reference. And the project aims are to find out what it is like for people who rely on unfunded support, or people with learning disabilities who rely on unfunded support. So Erin, I think you'll take over for me here for a little bit. Is that right?
Yeah,
Do you want me just to move on to the next slide?
yes, please. What is the project about? People with learning disabilities and family carers. People who do not get funded support for social care. the team. Lots of people are on the team, including South Africans and family carers. What is the problem? Lots of people with learning disabilities who need support do not get the money for social care. We want to find out how much support people people have and who gives them the support. We want to find out what people think about the support they have. Is it good or bad? Do they have enough support to do what they want to do? We have interviewed 23 people with learning disabilities and 14 family carers to ask them about their lives. We have been working together to make pen portraits, short summaries of their interviews.
Is this the bit where Catherine has taken over in the past, Erin?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think what I'll just do is I'll talk a little bit more about the research methods that has been used for this project, and I'll just talk a little bit about the method of analysis that's been used to make sense of the data. So as Erin said, the project has done interviews with 23 people with learning disabilities and 14 family carers. The aim of the interviews is to have been a kind of accessible approach to hearing their stories about their care, and where people have not used speech as a primary form of communication. Also, the research has involved carers to seek their views. Um, those interviews, and they're sort of summarized here slightly, have explored how people spent their time and what forms of support they have received or have given. The project has used those stories as the basis of weekly time diaries, which have captured the care that people have given and or received from informal carers, and also the care received by people with learning disabilities. So those interviews have been done, Erin, by the academic team as well as co-researchers such as yourself from Sheffield Voices and Sunderland People First. So the university and community-based researchers have worked together to design the interview questions and carry out the interviews. Community-based researchers bringing their lived experience and ability to empathize, and university-based researchers supporting the process for recording the weekly diaries. So you can see that what we've got from this research is we've built up a picture of the different support that people receive and when they receive it. Interviews have been transcribed and time diaries were completed after the interviews. So part of the research that has been helped kind of original and creative that you can see here is trying to find ways to translate those stories into an accessible format so people can read and understand them. So looking at the data, some of the text and tables that were produced have not been accessible to all members of the research team, or perhaps not generally, ways to find this, they need to get these stories out. And so the pen portraits, one of which you can see here, is a way of sharing a short story through images and short bits of text in ways that summarize these transcripts. And these pen portraits have been co-produced as well, so selecting through thinking about the words, the wording, thinking about the selection of images for each of these. So I'll read the slide here, so you can get a sense of one of the stories. So this is Melanie's story. Melanie, we learn, is a very chatty and friendly person. This is a pseudonym, obviously. She is a person with learning disabilities and autism, and she is very happy being who she is. Melanie likes to socialize with other people with learning disabilities and autism, and Melanie also spends a lot of time with her mum. She has a partner and loves being with them, and time goes quickly when they are together. She also has two really good friends from the autism and learning disability group that she is part of. They are such good friends that they are like sisters. They love going to the spa together, having sleepovers, and eating chocolate. Melanie doesn't like loud noises. She doesn't like it when things change at the last minute and she gets upset. Her friends know what upsets her and how to pick her up afterwards. Melanie would like to spend more time with her friends with learning disabilities, but sometimes there is not enough to do, and that makes her feel horrible inside. So the pen portraits are capturing the sorts of support and care, the relationships that are important for people in their everyday lives, and what those relationships do, but also challenges that exist for them. For instance, where they aren't given or they lack the necessary support in order to spend time doing the things that they want to do with the people that they want to spend time with. So in addition to the pen portraits, because what the project is trying to do is work out the what it's like to live without funded support or to live on the margins of support, is it's looking or applying a method called a cost replacement analysis, where, as we say in the slide, we work out how much support a person receives for free during the week and adds up the cost of that care if it had to be paid for. So we're looking at the narratives, the story data, alongside the time diaries that were constructed as part of this research process as a way of identifying where people are using informal support and to think about how much that support is saving the state. So if you can see something like this, for example, you have a weekly set out Sunday through to Saturday, and the green blocks sort of show when Melanie is being supported by family, friends, or community members. So in a way, it does something quite useful that the story doesn't, is it allows you to look at that as visualize. So we know that Melanie is loves doing all of these things with these people, and this is and that she does have access to those. But with the sort of timeline, we can sort of see where that is, and also where there are perhaps white blocks where that perhaps isn't happening. So, for example, like green on a Sunday evening, green on a Tuesday morning, Tuesday evening, a Wednesday afternoon, and a Friday all day, for example, as well as a Friday evening. That's when yeah, she's got people around. So Melanie, in this sense, has 25 hours a week of support. And to kind of support the cost replacement analysis, we're using the kind of living minimum wage as a standard. So the 2023 minimum wage of 10.42 an hour, this would cost £260.50 a week. So the cost replacement analysis is a research method that seeks to put an economic value on informal care, which informal carers feel has been ignored in public debates. The cost replacement analysis aims to calculate the value of informal care to the economy, and it has been used to argue for more recognition of the role that carers play and for more support for the care that they give. Typically, so in trying to do this in a way that's been meaningful and co-produced, typically a survey method is used in which informal carers generate these diary entries that capture the care they give across a period of time, and an economic value is attributed to each hour of active care. typically in England, and the rate is matched to the national living wage. So I think currently that actually is 11.44 in England. So the team committed to developing this approach inclusively and accessibly. So they've used the sort of narrative approach of getting stories from people and then moving from those stories to identifying where the actual care takes place. So these are some of the outcomes of this. So I hope that gives you a sense of how the project is currently actually working. We'll have some reflections at the end, a little bit about what we found out, but I think I'm going to move, we're going to move on to that now, Erin, and we're back to you.
What have we found out? It is difficult to work out what counts as care. Family carers give a lot of care. People with learning disabilities also give a lot of care. People with learning disabilities would often like support or different support to do what they want to do. People with learning disabilities and family carers need better information and help to get the support they need. Now we will play a video. This video is the self-advocates talking about their views.
What do you think is the most important part of the project?
Finding out about people's life and how much support they get.
Most important thing is that people are getting their voices heard, and people are being able to speak and say what they want to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, people stopping them, things like that, just giving people a chance to have a say in what their care looks like.
What sort of things did you notice in the interviews?
It's good to hear that everybody's got different views and how they want to be supported and things like that. And the people that we spoke to as well, the carers and as well, are really caring for the people that they the loved ones. I think people were happy with the care that they got from the people that cared for them. That's what came across to me.
What have self-advocates brought to the project?
Yeah, more advocates to help, like, support different ways.
Yeah.
And how different views on the project.
Mm.
To make it like equal with other people.
Yes, because self-advocates can bring empathy to a job. Empathy, like somebody might have been in a situation and might understand that situation to a point, you know, what the person's talking about.
Yes. Because I let us give our own opinions and what we think.
Yeah.
I think it's good to have a voice in the meetings, right, so that you can say how things are going and what might need to be improved.
So thanks for listening to that. We have a few more. So that's a sort of overview of the project, what we have been doing, and some indication of stuff that we've been finding out, as well as, I think, quite importantly, the role of the co-production in the work itself. So Erin, I did have a few questions, and you did prepare some responses because part of the research is about what things need to change for people on the margins of support and how we can go about making sure that those changes happen. So I did you have any responses to any of these questions, Erin, that you wanted to kind of highlight?
And I'm just looking up for Karen's email. So we've
Yep.
prepared some answers.
Do you want me to offer some reflections while you find it?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay, let's do that. So I think some of the things that we are finding out from this research, there are two things that I think are coming out that are particularly important from the findings, which is that issue of how do you actually unravel this question of what counts as care and what should have a cost replacement attached to it. And I think some of that emerges from the different ways that people talk about and describe things as care. For some people, care is just an ordinary part of their everyday life and their relationships, that the people that are important to them. So, for example, should we allocate a cost to the time that one participant spends having dinner on a Saturday night with their sister? Is this kind of care or just an example of a brother having a meal with their sister? And as I said, sometimes there are slightly different perspectives on what people are doing in those situations. So, for example, some of the people with learning disabilities and their informal carers shared separate accounts of their week in caregiving. Some people might describe a phone call to check in as being providing a care, whereas some people might just describe that as a phone call with my brother or sister, like we just had a chat that day. So there are already kind of complexities involved in thinking about where we assign that value to and what then, therefore, it means to kind of put a monetary value on something that is about, for some people, is just their ordinary relationship. So that question of what counts as care can become increasingly messy. So in completing the CRA, we've made decisions about what was and wasn't care, the CRA, sorry, the cost replacement analysis, and we now recognize the significant limitations of this. Another thing that also comes through from this is the importance of the care that people with learning disabilities themselves give in these relationships and in these different settings. So that might include babysitting, for example, a sibling's kid, or spending time with their parents and helping them in their everyday lives, going to the shops, kind of supporting and doing things at home, spending time with relatives. And these were stories of people with learning disabilities kind of looking after others as well. And we noticed and thought how often those aren't the subject of a similar kind of discussion about care, and how much is therefore being saved to the state or whoever as well by that. So we've begun to reflect on the absence of any attempts to produce a cost replacement analysis of the care that is provided by people with learning disabilities. So I can also offer some reflections to these questions, but I wonder whether, Erin, whether you have any, or whether you've got that email.
I couldn't find it.
That's all right. Do you want me to read out your responses?
Yeah.
I've got some. So what are the things that you think need to change for people on the margins of support? So what did you say? I interviewed a lot of people with a learning disability and their parent carers. Some of them were unhappy with the current level of support, and they told me that getting a support worker takes too long. It's too expensive, and you may end up only getting an hour of support. Some also said they find it hard to put their trust in a stranger. Does that sound right to you? Do you have
Yeah.
anything, do you have anything else that you might want to add? No. Okay. So who needs to listen to make sure those changes are made? I think social services need to change and they need to listen more. Whose voices need to be heard? The voices of people with a learning disability and their parent carers need to be heard. Do those responses sound right, or would you want to add anything else?
They're right.
All right, good. Thanks very much, Erin. Yeah. I've also asked some other people on the team what they thought in response to these questions, and actually I think they're perhaps questions for the audience to reflect on as well. So better understanding of what care can mean or not mean and how complex it is to try and define or cost. This means people with learning disabilities need the wider world to stop considering them as burdens who only need care, but also people who are giving care as well. Better support for families and communities and individuals when care is provided by an outsider, that they are given time and space to get to know that person so that they can offer the kind of care that is flexible, responsible, and based on a deep understanding that is consistent and also well paid. And poverty in general appears to be coming up as an issue. Those on carers allowance and their families much more likely to live in deep poverty. So trust in the system needs to be built back in. Who needs to listen to make sure those changes are made? Well, everyone. There's a misunderstanding across society and whose voices need to be heard and how. So self-advocates, unpaid carers, and also those on the margins who have not got community support in place. I largely, I think I'm at the end of my presentation as well. So it would be really interesting, as I said, if you've got questions, we'll try as best as we can to answer them. If you've got comments, I really would encourage the audience perhaps to kind of think if they've got ideas or suggestions of their own or experiences that are relevant, then please also share them.
Great. Well, thank you ever so much, Ned and Erin. That was a really interesting presentation. We've already got a couple of questions from audience members. So I can read them out, but if people would like to read them out themselves, then maybe if you just let me know by putting your hand up. So the first question is from Alison Tarrant, who's also a member of the Centre for Adult Social Care Research. If you want to come in, Alison, put your hand up. So Alison wrote, enjoying the presentation, can I just query your costing of £260.50 per week for Melanie based on the minimum wage? When we factor in overheads, management, office space, admin support, national insurance, etc., wouldn't the weekly cost be significantly more?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, yeah, clearly and obviously, I actually think that that would be significantly more. And I think this is a facet of it's a facet of the methodology of talking to people and asking them to share their stories about when they have that support. So actually, you know, what concerns these informal carers is when there is somebody else there or when they are doing that thing. So this, in a sense, boils it down to kind of a bare minimum, actually, of, you know, that's the time that I'm spending with that person. Also, then outside of that, perhaps the planning and arranging of some of that stuff isn't necessarily taken in, especially if it's out of sight. And it's unlikely then that people are coming to the, and especially as we're talking about care that sits in a different space. So it's the informal caring support that people are being provided by a family member, for example. They might not necessarily be thinking in a similar logic administratively.
Mm,
Obviously, that's a quite distinct lens to look through, but quite rightly is one that you would look through if you were actually administering this. So maybe there needs to be some kind of algorithm or something that then kind of escalates that cost to add in or tally in some of this stuff. I think it's an interesting point that I can take back
sure.
to the rest of the research team to actually say, well, if that was being done by somebody else, what about their travel costs? What about, yes, national insurance, other systems that need to be in place to have that? So yeah, so actually it's lower. I completely agree, Alison.
And we've got a similar point here by Charlotte Jones. So I think she said carers elements and allowance then seem insufficient for those on low incomes and or welfare benefits, never mind those who, in inverted commas, earn too much to get anything at all for the care and support they provide.
Yeah, it's cares element allowance that seems insufficient for those on low incomes and or well, never mind those who earn too much get. I mean, I don't know whether there's a question in that or whether it's
Yeah, I
just
think
a
it's
comment.
maybe following on from the point that Alison made essentially. But if Charlotte, I don't know if you wanted to ask a further question. If you do, then do stick your hand up and we can let you in. So there's a response here from Alison in the chat. So she said, thanks, Ned. I think it would be great to find a way of reflecting actual cost to avoid misrepresenting the financial contribution of informal care. So thanks for that, Alison. I've got a question I want to ask, but just before I do, then please let me know if you have any questions or queries that you want to ask through either putting something in the chat or through putting your hand up. I've got a question to both Ned and to Erin. So it's great to see that you involved self-advocates in the research. I was wondering what kind of training, if any, the self-advocates got for doing the research interviews, and maybe what advice self-advocates might give to other people doing similar interviews in the future.
Erin, did did you have any responses to those questions? The first question is, did you get any training for taking part in the research?
I'm trying to think, going back, think, ages.
That was going back some time ago. Did the second part of the question was, do you have any advice for other people who might be taking part in research like you have?
Just take your time and don't stress about it.
Good advice.
Good advice. Yes. If you take time to think about that other question, maybe if you could write it down or something or think about it, if you've got any answers to that other question about any training that you have had. So as far as I understand, I think that the training has involved elements of interview training, of kind of what it means to do an interview, what an interview is, thinking about some of the really important stuff that we think about when we do interviews with people, such as thinking about people's privacy and the confidentiality and the importance of that, but also then thinking about how you do interviews where you sort of offer and share your own experiences and are able to kind of talk on a similar level to somebody else. So that's sort of part of what we've found has been very, very important with this particular method is having that kind of equal voice. So I think I've lost my slides.
It's okay. I think we've just taken them, or Sean may have taken them off just so we could see the other participants in the room as well. Just because I think we've also got Marcus here as well now. So there was a question earlier on from Charlotte, and Charlotte, don't let us put you on the spot if you don't want to be, but we've unmuted your mic, so I don't know if you wanted to ask anything further.
Hello, yeah, I just put my comments in the chat box. Yeah, I was mainly agreeing. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Great. Thank you.
Sorry, I just carried on talking without realizing. Okay. Yeah, I was mainly agreeing with what Alison was saying, but I do think that with this cost reduction analysis, it may be worth approaching policymakers about that, because once you factor in all of those additional costs, if those people decided, the carers decided to just up sticks and not do it anymore, we would be in a really sticky situation all round, I think. And just the whole system of carers element and carers allowance, it wasn't even half that figure that you gave us, even before you add in all of the planning, the time, the travel, all of the administrative work, all of that. So yeah, it was mainly me just agreeing, I think.
Yeah. You know, we've sort of talked about that already, and I think partly what we're sort of thinking about is yeah, it's more at the level of the difficulty of perhaps, and I think there's perhaps a caution or hesitancy about kind of put the difficulty of putting a sum on some of this, partly because of that fuzzy definitions of what counts as care or not. But then also, yes, then actually, if we start thinking about that and sort of asking some of those complicated questions, actually, is well, what happens when such and such suddenly is not there to actually do that stuff that's really, really important, and what would it mean for somebody else to do that? And then saying, like, yeah, like, how much would that cost? And I think that probably takes a lot more thinking about what also then other people would, if you know, be worth perhaps going to someone and saying, well, what would that cost to you to do that bit of work, or if you, what I mean, if it is work, call it work, or to provide that form of support, and it would be more. I think, yes, approaching policymakers will be important, and is part of what this project will be, but I think it's about interpreting it and getting it right first.
Great.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. We also have a question from Jim Wright, and I've just unmuted Jim because he's willing to ask the question as well. So, Jim, do you want to ask your question?
I'll ask the question, yeah. Did the team consider the reciprocal nature of care? And doesn't everyone need care at some level, regardless of who we are? I suppose we all need to care about each other. And can we put a price on that? And if we do, does that somehow change what that care is about?
Yeah.
So I guess, you know, what I'm saying is, you know, in our interactions as human beings, it's important to care in different ways. And that means that regardless of somebody's disability, they care for us and each other in a different, you know, and that's reciprocated, you know, throughout that relationship. So I just want to make that point that it's not a one-way street. Care is very much a two-way street, and that somehow, if by putting a price on it, kind of, it's like you said, it's quite messy, it's quite complicated, that dynamic, and
Yeah.
we're putting a price on it.
Marcus, so you want to say something? You've got,
Yeah.
nice to have you here.
I have been listening. It's just that one of the questions, who should listen more? I think the council should listen, because the council doesn't listen to me or my mum, and it gets me really stressed because they're like suggesting you should go with this care provider. I'm happy with my care provider, but they want me to change, and they're not listening, and it gets me upset sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much, Marcus. Yes, so it's absolutely vital that you're being listened to, right?
Yeah. My mum does the fighting for me, but sometimes I feel that I'm just a name on a piece of paper, and it's disrespectful.
Mm-hmm. When you're
And
not
it's
actually at the center of that discussion.
Yeah, I should be the center of being respected, but I don't feel like I am sometimes, and it's really horrible. So my mum does all the fighting for me.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Marcus. Did you have anything to say to any of the other questions?
What was it?
I can't remember. I forgot.
What needs to change is that we need the council need to get to know the person more rather than just suggesting daft stuff, because the council suggested for me to go on the tram on my own and all that stuff, and I'm like, I can't go on the tram on my own. They suggested for me to have two care providers, for one independent living because I'm moving out eventually, and one for my leisure. And my mum says I'm not paying two providers, and they don't listen to me or my mum, and it's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So they need to really get a kind of deep understanding of what it is you want.
I just want them to spend at least a day with me to understand who I am, what needs I need help with, or anything.
Mm-hmm.
They just think, oh, it's just a wheelchair, we can just mess him about.
And just put a
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Could I come in and ask a question as well, just to Marcus? So I was wondering, Marcus, as you were answering that question, do people ever come to sort of see you face to face, or do you get these messages via sort of letters and things like that, or by emails? Or so is it have a discussion with people, or is it just all written?
I either get letters, or my mum gets the phone call saying, "Oh, we're suggesting this," and I'm like, "Nobody's told us. You should have come out."
Nobody's ever met Marcus face to face.
Yeah, this is Cheryl.
Sorry, I'm just here to support Marcus.
Okay.
Yeah. I had a review with my council, and that's the only thing that they do. And the one before that, I had a review, and then they took off my money off. So they don't always come to me. They always letter me or ring me, and they should really speak to me face to face.
Yeah, so it's very hard for you to be able to have input in that kind of way, by the sounds of things. Brilliant, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's fine. No worries.
Great. Well, there's a comment from Leanne, but I think before we go that, could we just go back to Jim's question? Because I think we maybe Jim had asked that question about the value of care. And Ned, I don't know if you wanted to come back on that.
Yes, I mean, yes, just to say, yeah, completely right. And I think from the outset, this project, especially in its kind of co-productive element in bringing the voices of people with learning disabilities in, and also their informal carers, of understanding actually that this care and support is part of people's lives and everyday interactions and relationships. So it isn't a one-way street, and it isn't, so it is, for the way people talk and think about this stuff isn't just a kind of mechanistic kind of transaction that takes place, but it's actually really the stuff of people's lives. And that goes both ways in the care that people with learning disabilities are providing to their family and to their friends, and also in the other direction. So yes, so that is really, really important. I think this is, and I think perhaps some of the challenges that we're talking about of cost, of how you allocate a cost to this, it's very complicated because there's so much of that stuff that does go on. And very clearly, if we're looking at what Marcus is saying, then in that kind of distance that exists between those people who are doing some of this assessing, there's probably a whole heap of stuff that they're not actually even looking at, or not even picking up on. So how much actually is how much is being saved, or how much actually uncosted care is out there?
Great. Thank you for that, Ned.
Thank you.
I've got Leanne Woodward here, who's put a comment there, but she's also going to just read it out and maybe talk to it a bit more as well. And it's coming back to Marcus's point.
Oh, hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm in the office. I just moved. Yeah, I'm just absolutely shocked that no one's met Marcus face to face, really. And in terms of that, as a social worker, and that's my bread and butter. And for him to just say he feels like a piece of paper on a number, yeah, it's really upsetting for my profession. Like I said, we spend a lot of time. I'm obviously in another area in South Wales, but that's the main focus, is visiting these individuals as many times as needed, getting to know them on a personal level and what their preferences are. And yeah, I just think these people are self-advocating so admirably today, and for somebody to not even have met that individual in person is quite shocking.
Thanks very much, Leanne. I don't know if Marcus or Ned, if you wanted to come back on that at all.
Marcus, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, thanks for that, Leanne. It was really good to listen. Yeah, it's just annoying that people don't listen to me at all. It's makes my anxiety to go crazy, and it really annoys my mum. And once my mum gets upset, that makes me upset. So I really want the council to listen. The one thing that really annoyed me is that they suggested 2 providers for one little thing. No, thank you. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. It's just pathetic.
Yeah.
I've had so many negative things with the council. It took us 5 years to get respite overnight. It took us 5
Oh,
years.
goodness me. That's
And
awful.
we were told that every year that we had reviews to see if we needed anything deducting or anything adding, but they never review my budget. And also when they do review it, they want to deduct it, and I need more money because my mum and dad can't look after me all the time. I need to be out with support workers.
Yeah.
No.
It's ridiculous. No.
Thank you very much, Marcus, for talking about those experiences. It sounds really, really difficult. And I think there's also a comment here from Charlotte Jones, who was saying that it sounds like there's quite a lot of difference between different local authorities. So Charlotte's saying it's similar in North Wales to Leanne. Social workers meet as regularly as possible. And she also says that she's sorry to hear about the experiences that you're having there, Marcus. So is there any other questions that people have that they'd like to ask? So either feel free to put things in the chat or to put your hand up if you'd like to ask them to people. The other thing to say is that, as I mentioned before, this is part of a conference that we've been running, and there's a couple more events to come. So I think Sean might put the link or down to the conference for the rest of the presentations. And if you've missed any of the ones that have happened so far, then those will be up online soon, so you can catch up online. So I think that seems to be the questions that we've received so far. So I'd really like to thank Ned and his co-presenters for taking part. So thank you very much for Erin for presenting, and for Marcus to presenting, and Ned as well. So great to see everybody. We do hope you'll join us again at one of the ExChange seminars in the future. So thanks very much, everybody, and we'll see you again.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. Thanks, Erin. Thanks, Marcus.